Once again, I'm going to ask two simple questions. Please raise your hand. I'm going to choose an arbitrational topic or an item. We're going to assume that the issue of marginal utility, that if I give you more like pizza and pizza, you get more full and more full, it's not going to be an issue, it's not going to decrease. So I'm going to choose an issue, a good right now is Snuggie. Raise your hand if you want one Snuggie for free. Raise your hand if you want 10. The number should have increased, but that's okay. I agree with my fellow panelists that what is once seen as hoity-toity in the past is changed because of roll time. But I want everybody right now to put on their metaphorical economic hats on right now. I'm going to explain the bottom line. Because more or less, money is where it works. In economics, we have a concept in Latin that says, ceteris paribus, all else remains constant. Therefore, we can evaluate two arbitrational elements, cultural integrity and individual integrity. With that stated, cultural integrity, individual integrity, I'm not saying which one's more important than the other. However, there's a give and take between a production possibility frontier. A production possibility frontier simply is an economics term that means how much we can produce of one good without with the least amount of underproduction for another good. Pretty much means in order to produce good A, you have to minimize the production of good B, because we cannot assume we have unlimited amount of resources or demand. With that stated, if we just choose cultural integrity and individual integrity in terms of a graph on top and on bottom, and we assume that we want more individual integrity, by a byproduct, we need to have less cultural integrity. But is that right? Are we to assume that to improve individuals' integrity, just say the 1%, the rest of society should suffer? Or should we try to take a more proactive decision or a more proactive assessment? Because if we're trying to improve society, we're trying to improve the most of society. Because regardless of governmental spending increasing, there's going to be unemployment. There's going to be people who need aid. So why don't we make the best of what we have? I feel that the individual integrity is extremely vital. However, we can only produce what's in our production possibility frontier. We cannot exceed it because it's not physically possible. Now, I don't mean, my words may seem harsh, it's not to directly offend my fellow panelists, I respect what he stated. However, my argument for tonight is simply that cultural integrity is more important. I'm not saying that the word more important is the correct term. However, it's the most logical. It's the best way we can implement what we have in our resources. And if we want a better society, it's very important. I wish we could all deal with everybody's individual integrity at the source if we had all those resources, but we don't. We live in the real world, not the what-if world. Until we move to the what-if world, then we can deal with everybody's individual integrities on a per basis. Meaning, if you want more whatever, and you want more whatever, and it doesn't impede from the grand picture of everybody else, mazel tov, we should do that. However, that's not what's happening right now. We can only have so many elements which we can take and give to everybody else, and until that actually changes, we're not necessarily stuck, but we have to do with what we have. We have to do best with what we have. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you again, Max. What I asked this group here is what you would feel if you are the side that is now product B. If society has chosen that you are product B, and you are suddenly going to be marginalized for product A. Who has chosen which of these two things we are going to pursue? And who is to say that these things are not arbitrary and at the extreme, to the point that we should question whether or not marginalization of one for the other is in itself right in any way? We've orchestrated our society in a lot of different ways, and currently we have this perception that we are trying to maximize something. We can't quite define what it is, but it's sure as hell always included a few groups, and that's always been white, rich males, and that's been the way of things. Of course, white, rich males now sometimes includes the Irish, the Germans, the Italians, those people that were before not considered white. We oftentimes forget that. We oftentimes forget that those groups that are now part of the power structure were once the outsiders. And we start thinking, well, if it goes back that far, and if it goes so far as the skin color not even having mattered, at one point or another, when can society make me product B? And when can it marginalize me? If we pursue this idea of indefinite growth, and if we pursue this idea that A has to be capitalized upon to the utmost extent, we're opening ourselves up to the possibility of becoming B. Now, I understand that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with the transgender issue. I understand that people feel unnatural, or we should say unnatural in a way, it's societally engendered, but we oftentimes feel uncomfortable around these issues. Sex is built into how we structure our society. When we talked about the first group, we talked about how we've often divided labor and society and economies on sex. And when people want to transcend that barrier, we become uncomfortable with it. Now, I understand that that's uncomfortable, and that's a real reason that people choose that this group is going to be product B. They're easy to put into product B because they are what we're not okay with. They're something that we just don't feel is part of us. But we're not part of somebody. We're not part of a group. And the A group may choose to someday do the same thing to us. Now, I can understand attempting to have efficiency in society. I can understand not attempting to devolve into a state of pure anarchy. As I said, there are moments where culture has to come together, and we have to ask, are these moments really so far as to say that it's going to extend into a group, into an identity, into a people? Or are we going to say that it comes into our common goods? Now, our common goods are one thing, and I can say, in product A, maybe we should say, well, public transportation really does make sense for our society in the long run, so let's stop building the 91 freeway. It's a wreck. It's not really going to get any better. That's a cultural decision that makes sense. Going ahead and saying, this is product B. These people are product B, and they will be marginalized for the sake of product A. Again, typically rich, white, male, often Christian individuals, lest we forget that, religious minorities are often, disguised in the American society, but have been prevalent before, then we're just going to open ourselves up to the possibility of that reinstituting itself. We open ourselves up to the possibility of repeal to every normalization that's ever been made. Every battle that's ever been fought for normalization and equality of one group opens itself up to being repealed, so long as we don't demand that for everyone else. I understand that there's difficulties and there are issues of discomfort, and we're not really sure how to reorder our society when we go past these barriers that we've placed upon it. But I remind this entire group that once upon a time we did have these exact same structures, these separations of restrooms, of living spaces, of marriages, of how we order our society, and it was called between the white world and the black world. And these are facts of our country that are, about 50 years past at this point. They're within the lifetime of many individuals still walking with us this day. And I ask us if we would go back to those times. And if we would look back upon ourselves with the same pride that we feel currently with our discrimination against a group that is making us just as uncomfortable as black people did before, and how shameful that sounds now, I believe that's a shame we'll feel someday in the future. And I believe that we need to be on the right side of history, and we understand that the individual matters. Thank you.